I've been making more comparisons between Mattel Electronics in television and Atari. Different games, but the same result. Look at Atari basketball. And in television. I think in television plays much more like real basketball. Here's Atari soccer. And in television. Again, I find in television more sophisticated and lifelike. If you try them both, I think you'll find the clear winner is in television. From Mattel Electronics. Excuse me, have you compared them to in television?
In television?
Sure, they've got great space games, like in television Space Battle.
I didn't know.
And now there's Space Armada and the incredible Astro Smash.
I didn't know.
Here, compare for yourself. In television space games. From Mattel Electronics.
What's up, hackers? Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and usually this would be when we do some cyber news, but honestly, other than the Twitter thing, which I'm done talking about, there hasn't been a whole lot of wild cyber news. Taggart, you might say, what about the Brute Red-Tail thing? Yeah, I don't care. The C2 dramas are not news as far as this defender is concerned. Our goal is still to detect behaviors. And so, in terms of massive new cyber news, there wasn't anything that I felt really rose to the level. There are a couple of things that I'm tracking, though. Check out the Discord for some of the things we put in cyber news if you're interested in that. Things like we have potentially interesting Java RCE, but I haven't seen a whole lot going on with that just yet. So I think it's fully baked enough to report on. Right, Office macros. You know what? I had that, and then I forgot about it. Good call, Orbital. Yeah, so that is one bit of news that I do want to touch on before we jump in. Just kidding. The PyPy stuff is kind of news, but not really cybersecurity focused. Yeah, that broke late last night. All right, yeah, we'll talk about those. Okay, so we'll start with the Office macros. Since I have a desktop open, we'll bring that up, because I do have that saved. Yeah. So this is from the Hacker News, but obviously Bleeping Computer broke the story that Microsoft is planning to roll back Office VBA macros by default. Now, that is kind of a misleading headline. Let's remember that the plan that Microsoft had put in place was to disable by default macros in documents that had what's known as the mark of the web, which is essentially an alternative data stream, which is a Windows file system idiosyncrasy or feature, if you want to put it that way, that indicates that a file was downloaded from the internet. So the idea would be that for any of those files, it would open up in protected mode and you wouldn't be able to execute macros. However, that has been rolled back. That change is not going to be put in place. And that's kind of it. This was rolled out in February 2022, said it was going to do that, and then it just didn't happen. There's a lot of speculation as to why. I have my own theories. I will tell you that I suspect that obviously they got feedback from some customers that this was going to be a breaking change in a way that was untenable. I suspect that it was a government customer that probably tipped the scales, given that we know that government customers like the Department of Defense are the leading extended support customers for Microsoft. And so if you think about that kind of mentality and then what they may be doing with macros, or what certain divisions inside of that organization might be doing with macros that would mess this up, right? If they have what amounts to an intranet server where they're downloading files, right? But that would still tag things with mark of the web. It may have been organizationally problematic for this to get rolled out. That's the kind of thing that stops this in its tracks. And it was already, I mean, I will just say that it was always going to be a little bit weird for Microsoft to do this, given the fact that Microsoft has built an empire on backwards compatibility. That's kind of their whole deal, right? Think about how many ancient Windows applications can still run on Windows 10 and 11. And that's because Microsoft has prioritized, almost to the exclusion of other things, backwards compatibility, allowing those older versions of portable executables to run in newer environments, making sure that like WoW 64 and 32-bit environments are available for folks even today. So just something to think about there. And if you are responsible, of course, for an organization in which macros are used heavily, there are other things that you can do. You can configure Office to launch in protected mode by default. That's a group policy you can deploy. You can also, of course, and should be monitoring invocations of things like PowerShell and cmd.exe as children of Office applications. You can go even deeper than that, but definitely the defenses that we've had in place for some time against VBA macros should still apply. And yes, the PyPy stuff, I'll briefly talk on that. So basically, PyPy is the package manager or the package repository for Python packages. We're actually going to use it today. And it basically has decided that for the, I think, top 1% of packages, they are going to enforce MFA. And they're even giving away some Titan security keys, physical security keys, to enable not just developers anymore, but maintainers of these super important open source projects to make sure that their security is top notch so that the package cannot be compromised. Because PyPy has had a couple of package compromises recently that have resulted in malicious code being installed on users' machines. There is a bit of a mixed reaction to this in the Python developer community. Some folks are very excited about it, and others feel like they should not have the requirement of MFA forced upon them. And honestly, I think that's just open source whining. I do. I just think that's the same kind of, but my rights sort of complaining for no reason that you sometimes get in the more frustrating parts of the open source community, where they're much more concerned about their individual choices, not taking into consideration what it actually means for a larger community. If that sounds a little bit like other annoying ideologies, that's because it is. And it's ironic that you would have that mentality in the open source community, which is supposed to be essentially about, as I've said before, open source at heart is really mutual aid, right? And so if you're building things for others so that they can use them, why not also engage in security practices that help others? You know? And it's not that big of a deal adding MFA to your workflow. It really isn't. It's doable. Sure, are there going to be edge cases where it breaks? Fine. Fix them. I don't know. I don't have a lot of patience for I want to have bad security because it's my choice, not yours. All right. With that out of the way, then, let's talk about what we're going to do today. So, over the last several months, we have been building out a virtualized lab in a Proxmox hypervisor. And as of today, most of it is gone. I have burned it to the ground. The hypervisor is still around, of course, but almost every other part of it is totally different. Our jump box remains, but that's kind of it. And the reason is that, first of all, the whole point was to try to treat this thing as ephemeral, right? We wanted to build these machines to be treated as cattle, not pets, as the term goes. There's got to be a better metaphor for that. But they had kind of become that way, right? It was becoming kind of a problem to maintain all of these things. And so for that reason, I wanted to take the lessons that we had learned over the last months of building this stuff out and trying to add some automation to it and kind of start over again with those lessons in mind and kind of reorganize the project to make better use of that information. Hexor, have I tried Detection Lab? I have tried Detection Lab. It is too dang much. I don't want to use Detection Lab because it's so abstracted that I don't get to make a lot of choices that I want to make with it. Okay, as you'll see with this project, it is a lot more hands-on, and that is by design, because I don't want... This lab serves two purposes for me. Yes, it's to build out like detections and blue team operations, things like that, but it is also to keep my DevOps skills fresh to allow me to use and understand the underlying technologies that go into making these things work. So for example, one of the things we're going to do today is build out an Elastic server from scratch, basically, because that doesn't happen that often. People deploy Security Onion or they use tools like Detection Lab, but I think it helps to know what's under the hood there. And then once we understand that, we can build like an Ansible playbook or an Ansible role to actually do that for us. So I do like Detection Lab, but it doesn't suit my purposes for this. Hi, Binary Digit. Good to see you. And Alpha Streamer, Edomaniac, and Havoc. Thank you so much for the follows. So this is where we are starting, and I want to give you a bit of a tour of where we're kind of going here. So the first thing is we have inside of the hypervisor, which is not pictured in this diagram because this is for all intents and purposes a networking diagram, not a virtualized diagram. We're starting here with our gateway for both networks, which is the OpenSense, which is our first big change. I've moved from pfSense to OpenSense. We'll talk about the differences in a moment. As our router, this is serving two different virtual switches, and it has two gateways. We have a 192, so we have two different subnets here. We have a 192.168.99.1. This /24 is serving our infrastructure network. And so this is going to have our jump box, which is actually right here. I'm in the jump box right now. It's a KDE Neon machine. Works great. Love it a lot. And it's also for now going to hold the ELK stack. And instead of using Waza this time, as we did last time for our agent that we deploy to our lab machines, we are going to use the Elastic Agent. And the two reasons I wanted to do that. One, it feels like the Elastic Agent is going to have a lot fewer gotchas than using Waza because it's first party to Elastic. So I want to see how that goes. And I was wary of using FileBeat before because I didn't want to have to do like each one for each thing I wanted to collect. But the cool thing about Elastic Agent is that, like Waza, it does that same thing for me where I can configure from my dashboard all of the different sources I want to collect from an endpoint. Yes, this is Xmind, which you can get at xmind.net. It is not free. It's a free for certain, it's like shareware almost. As you can see, I'm in evaluation mode, and if I wanted to purchase it, it's actually kind of annoying because it's a subscription, which is why I haven't done it. This works fine for me. I just happen to like the way that it works and the way that it looks. There are other mind mapping tools, of course, but this has been the one that I've used, honestly, for like a decade at this point. God, I'm old. But yeah, Xmind. So, CodeBlue says I've been using Waza for a bit, but the straight Elastic stuff is interesting as they bulk out the SIM EDR. Still use Splunk in my lab because of work stuff. Yeah, so I use Splunk at work, but I also use Azure Sentinel. I use all sorts of different stuff. But the objective in this lab is to demo what you can do with pretty much entirely open source tools. So that's kind of like part one. But yeah, I want to try the Elastic Agent because I know that it has a little bit more of an EDR flavor. You can turn the Elastic Agent on in block mode, which I think is really interesting. I want to see what that does. And I also know that the configuration of alerts is a lot easier than with Waza. With Waza, we had to do a lot of like weird regular expression parsing, and we were editing a bunch of XML. I want to see how that works with Elastic Agent. And just to show you what we're going to be using to help us out along the way, I've been doing a lot of reading this summer, as some of you know, because I've been doing reading on like Linux kernel programming and eBPF. And another book that I picked up is this awesome book on threat hunting with Elastic Stack from Packet Publishing by Andrew Pease. This was, I picked it up in a Humble Bundle, and it absolutely slaps. This book gives you a step-by-step into how to install Elastic and Kibana from scratch, and then use it to do threat hunting. Given that I want to use this as kind of a resource, it'll also walk you through like the diamond model and the kill chain model. If you're interested in threat hunting, this is a fantastic book. And then if you have Homelab ambitions, oh, Alpha Streamer. I want to tell you first, please do not refer to me as bro. And also, we are going to go slowly over ideas, but please understand that what we're doing is the culmination of months and months and months of work. If this is beyond where you are right now, that's totally understood. That's why all of the recordings of this material are on YouTube. So if there's something that you're not getting, feel free to check those out. Just look for Homelab in the channel. Definitely something that you might want to consider doing. I will do my very, very best, as always, since you're new here, I am a teacher, to explain all of the concepts. But yeah, some of this is kind of like established material. But if you are interested in threat hunting, this book has been pretty great as a starting point. So I'm going to use that because it has some nice step-by-steps to get Elastic going. All right. So once we have this back up, the other change from our original layout is that it used to be the case that we had a dedicated server for running Ansible playbooks and things like that. And I am not doing that anymore. It was redundant. I can run Ansible from the jump box, and why not, right? Because that's where I'm editing the code anyway. So I might as well run Ansible from the jump box and maintain my inventory there. So I've gotten a little bit better with Ansible, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to do that. And then, in addition, not pictured here, the jump box is also going to be empowered with Terraform. And that is going to allow us to deploy new VMs and new templates directly to the hypervisor from the jump box. So the jump box is kind of an important machine, and that's why we're going to spend a lot of time in it. But yeah, so Ansible for post-provisioning. And we're going to go through all these tools just to show you how they're set up. And then we're going to do Packer for template management and Terraform for lab asset provisioning. So what that basically means is we don't want to have to build virtual machines from scratch every time we come up with a new VM, right? I don't want to have to go to create VM in Proxmox every time and like walk through all of this. So instead, what I'm going to do is I use Packer to create templates for me. And the other reason why this is super important, is because if you're building out Windows virtual machines and you don't have a license for them, right, then you're kind of stuck on the eval license, which, yes, you can extend. You can get like 180 days out of it. But then after that 180 days, what are you going to do? You want to be able to refresh those machines. So to do that, we're going to make Packer handle the template generation. That's going to make it much easier for us to build out new templates when we need it. So that can happen every, few months, and we can make that process pretty seamless. We'll talk about Packer in depth in just a second. Once Packer has done its job, then Proxmox is going to do its job, and Proxmox is going to build out, allow us to define the VMs that we spin up from those templates. So for example, we can have a Proxmox, sorry, I keep saying Proxmox, Terraform. We're going to use Terraform to spin up our VMs, and we can create a Terraform project that handles like building out our domain controller, file server, workstation. So we can basically define our Windows lab in a single Terraform project, almost did it again, that we can bring up, we can modify using the Terraform code rather than manually clicking through stuff in Proxmox. Then, and this is the final piece, after that, Ansible handles the post-provisioning. So Ansible roles and playbooks are going to be how we send configuration. Like, for example, if we have a Linux server, do we want it to become a Docker host? We can use an Ansible playbook to do that, and that will all be handled right from here in our jump box. Kairos 4545. I don't usually describe myself as a hacker, but I guess sure. But what that means is incredibly broad. There are defenders. There are offensive security specialists. There are programmers. There are exploit developers. There are malware analysts. There are researchers. There are threat hunters. There's so much in this world, in this realm of information security. And so if this is your first time seeing all of the things that we do, welcome. There's a lot to it, though. And if you want to see some other folks who do this kind of stuff, check out the hack list. There are a lot of information security streamers, and a lot of them are really good friends. You should check out their streams as well. Okay, I'm just checking, see if any questions I missed. Got the Elastic book. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this. Tater, good to see you. Yes, listener, that was the inspiration for the name of the Discord. Okay, let's begin with Packer. So Packer is a really funny bit of tech, and you can check it out at packer.io to learn about it. We've done this before, but so Packer is going to handle the creation of the virtual machine templates. And so if we're doing, I usually just do like a search for Packer Proxmox. Proxmox is our hypervisor, right? And so from Packer's point of view, that's what's known as a builder. And the builder determines like all the stuff you need to configure in order to make this happen. How do I make Packer talk to Proxmox? Well, the first thing that I'm going to need is credentials. Okay, I have already configured my credentials, but I've done it in a much better way than I was doing in the past, where I was like hard coding API keys. That's not happening anymore. Instead, in Proxmox, I have an API token that I've created, and I've given it PVE admin permissions. So I've set up my API user and my API token. So that's kind of part one. Then I don't want to hard code those credentials into my Packer stuff. And this right here, by the way, is a Packer config file, right? And this is the build script basically for this is the desktop template. Now you do see some passwords here. These are the internal passwords for the lab. I don't care about these getting out in the wild because they only exist inside of my isolated lab, and this is just a utility for me to get like an admin account going for Ansible to do its work. That's essentially what this username and password is. So I have these variables defined up here. I can change them up as I like, but then once I go inside of the configuration for the Proxmox ISO type, so this builds from a disk image. So we give it the Windows 10 Enterprise disk image, we give it the hash of it, and then we give it, this is kind of interesting. Despite it being a Windows machine, we're going to communicate with this thing over SSH, and that is like, I feel like my secret sauce for my lab builds is that it is SSH everywhere. I do not mess around with WinRM. I do not mess around with other kinds of Windows remoting. It is SSH start to finish for all of my assets. And the way that works is that we have to configure some stuff during the build in order to make that work. Actually, I need to nix this SSH host. That's no longer true. I have fixed that problem. And in fact, the QEMU agent is also wrong. That is now true. So we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. I configure how many cores. So 2 cores, 4 gigs of RAM. That's a little light for a Windows machine, but it's okay for our lab purposes. We set up the VM name, the template description, and the additional ISO files. So what we're doing with the additional ISO files, we're of course mounting as an install disk the Windows install. This is like the trial, the eval version of Windows, and this is what we're going to install from. But we have 2 other disk images that we mount, and they're super important. The first one is this auto unattend windesktop.iso. Now, this is an ISO file that I made, and I'll show you how in just a second. This is going to contain all of the what's called auto unattend answers. It's an answer file that allows me to automate the install process. So rather than clicking through all of the options when you do a Windows install, instead, if this thing is mounted and it finds this specific file, this auto-unattend.xml file, which we'll look at in just a minute, it'll follow the instructions inside of that XML file to run the install. So that's what's up there. Now, in addition, because we're using Proxmox and because we're using VirtIO drivers for most of our work here, we also have to mount this virtio.iso, which is available from the Fedora project, and it contains the drivers that we need to run VirtIO stuff. And this was like a huge stumbling point for me for a long time, was figuring out how to make this work. So I also need to mount this disk with important drivers and also the QEMU agent installer. This thing, if you've ever used like VMware guest editions or VirtualBox guest editions, that's kind of the same thing that the QEMU agent is. It's an agent that lives on the system that is going to report back to the hypervisor about the current state of the VM. So if I want to get information like the IP address inside of the virtual network, I need that agent running. That's the only way I can do automated, not statically set IP addresses for spin up, and I really want that to work. Okay, well, Wookie, I have figured out the VirtIO driver situation, so now you're going to learn how to do it. After we've set that up, you also see that these machines are being given 2 network adapters, one of them on the Virtual Bridge 1 and another one on the Virtual Bridge 2. I may change that up at some point, but basically what I'm doing is I'm giving each one an internet-connected network interface and an isolated network interface. So this is the infrastructure network, right, where it's the 192.168.99 network. That has an internet connection, no problem whatsoever. The VMBR2 is isolated by default because if I'm running malware or whatever, I want that stuff to live inside of the lab. So basically, if I am running anything spicy, I can just disable from the hypervisor that specific network adapter, and then it is what it is, right? So that makes it a little bit easier for me to do that. Now, I could also do that with firewall rules. I have found that this works more easily for my purposes, but your mileage may vary, because I would prefer to just disconnect or reconnect network interfaces than futz with firewall rules. But you do you. Hey, Bulo, Collins, Wanjohi, thank you so much for those follows. And then finally, after we do all this build, Producer Wolf coming in as well. After we do the build, we do a final provisioner with a Windows shell, and just to run ipconfig. And that basically just reports out what the current IP address is. That doesn't actually mean anything, because it's a template, right? It's not going to have the same IP address when we spin it back up. But this is a way of me knowing that the thing is working. Now, I have made this, as I said, we need the auto unattend to make this build automation work. How does that work? This auto unattend.xml file, which is a bunch, but after today's stream, I am open sourcing this repo. So after today's stream, the SecLab repo is going to be fully open source, and you'll be able to get it and check the Discord for that information. There's a lot going on here, and most of it, I have to say, I want to credit. I think I should have. If you search for like Windows Packer Proxmox, the first result is this link from Hold My Beer Security, and I have to tell you, I had to read it like 1,000 times, but it eventually did unlock the secrets for what I need. This also, by the way, has the link to that VirtIO driver. I'm ignoring the HashiCorp Vault stuff because I'm using environment variables for my secrets. Oh, I needed to mention that. So as I said, I needed to create a credentialed connection between Proxmox and Packer. How do I do that? I can hard code that into my Packer config, but I'm open sourcing the project. I don't want to do that, right? And I don't want to have, it's a bad idea to store secrets in Git repositories anyway. So how do I avoid that? The answer is environment variables. Packer knows how to look for environment variables as well. And so there are specific environment variables you can set to enable that connection. I think in this case it's like Proxmox user and then Proxmox user token or something like that, or Proxmox API token. I forget what the specific, because Terraform uses a different environment variable to do the same thing, but I've set them both. And so they're just kind of set up already in my terminal session. I can add them to my fish config or bash RC, whatever I want, and then I can just have those ready to go when I start up. Hi, Frackery. I can't answer that question. How much did you miss? You missed, about 30 minutes. We've been talking about the rebuild of the lab. Now, why don't we see if this thing works out? So, let's see. We'll do Packer validate. The configuration is valid. You love to see it. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is by destroying this template and letting Packer rebuild it for me. And I'll do the same thing with the Windows server as well. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about on the auto unattend. So this is the secret to making it all work. Much of this is what I have kind of copy-pasted from places like Detection Lab. I found a lot of these answers there. The product key and stuff doesn't actually apply because it's an eval version, so don't worry about that. You do have to set the admin password in here, right? Which is going to be the same as we use inside of the Packer file. And we're creating a SecLab user and adding them to the administrators group. Now, this is where the cool stuff happens. There's a section here called first logon commands. And this is on first boot. These are the commands that run when the machine starts, okay? So first off, we're turning off that new network window. It's like pop over. Do you want to do enable? Like, what kind of thing is this? Public, private, company? We're turning that off. Also, if you yourself want to add more synchronous commands to do whatever you want to do, that's totally fine. But be aware of this order. They have to be sequential and they cannot be duplicated. The build will fail if they are. So just be aware of that. The next stuff that we do is all about enabling SSH. So we're enabling SSH for Windows hosts, right? By adding the Windows capability. And then we're starting the service and we're setting it to start automatically. And as of now, the firewall rules to allow SSH are set up automatically by this, so we're sorted. We don't have to do a manual firewall rule configuration. Then we're going to make sure that my password never expires. Easy peasy. And then, last but not least, we're going to set up the QAMU agent. And you see that I'm using MSI exec, and we're using something from the F drive. What? Okay, the F drive is that VirtIO image. And in fact, if we go back up to the top and Wookie, this is what you were looking for. The driver paths right here, this is what you need in order to make This is what you need to make VirtIO work. Okay. This is what you need to make the VirtIO stuff work. You can kind of see we've got F, VIO input, W10, AMD 64, right? All of these things we're adding to our driver paths. That's the deal. All right. With this done, let's give this a shot. Hacker build. All right, we're creating the VM. Over in Proxmox, we see that a new ID of 100 has come up. SecLab WinWS has come up. VirtIO, Wally, good question. VirtIO is for NIC's end. This was like the stumbling block. It's for the disk drive, because the SCSI drivers are VirtIO as well. And so if you don't have that, Windows cannot find anything to install. Kind of a big deal. Now, it says waiting for SSH to become available. That's fine. This thing is hopefully powering up. Let's look at the hardware. You can see that we've got Win 10 Enterprise mounted. We've got Auto Unattend and VirtIO mounted as well. So far, this is working exactly as we wanted it to. And we're just kind of waiting to see the Windows icon boot up. If it does, which I'm really hopeful about. Enterprise.iso. Usually doesn't take this long to boot. Everything looks good though. Auto Attend WinDesktop.iso is mounted. Right? Yep, Win 10 Enterprise is mounted. And the VirtIO is mounted as well. The hard disk is good. We've got 2 network interfaces as we should. There we go. Okay. We just had to be patient. But notice that its setup is starting, right? I should not have to touch the keyboard or the mouse to make any of this happen. You can just let this thing ride. While we're doing that, let's talk about some of the other components to the lab. Yep, there you see, it just kicked right off. Right, I didn't have to click what kind of version I'm installing or anything else like that. And it's copying files. Looks good. So we've gotten past this part, which means that the disk driver was detected, or the disk was detected, and it's able to actually load things in. I learned patience while training machine learning models. That'll do it. Hey, GIF, thank you so much for the bits. Really appreciate that. All right. As that is building, let's talk about kind of the other components of the lab. So that's the Auto Unattend. That was, I think, important to go over. And let me just commit that change. SecLab hacker. By the way, let me know if the text is too small. I can zoom this stuff in. That's no problem. I might do that right away, actually. Yeah, just a little bit. Text is too small. How about now? Couple of other helpers in here. I have a make iso.sh. This is designed for the Auto Unattend creation. So basically you point that at the scripts folder and it creates a new ISO, an Auto Unattend ISO for you. Just be aware of that. And what did I change? Git diff. Oh, right. Git commit update yes for QEMU agent. Awesome. Off you go. Now, this is kind of the thing. If you can see see the layout here, I have inside the SecLab project, I have Ansible, Packer, Terraform folders, which means I previously had and have a repository called SecLab Playbooks. I have taken everything from SecLab Playbooks and put it in the Ansible folder here, because at this point, if I'm running everything from the jump box, there's no point in having two different repositories. So once we're done here, all of the things that you'll need to run a lab like this will be in a single repo. Is there a reason why you use Fish instead of Z-Shell? Yes, I have several reasons. One, I like the autocomplete way better. Two, I like the theming better. And three, I like the scripting better. So all of those things go into, yes, I know it's not technically POSIX compliant, and I don't care. Actually, newer versions of Fish are closer. You can use $ and stuff like that in newer versions of Fish just fine. So yeah, that is why I use Fish and not Z-Shell. I really prefer the way that it handles a lot of autocompletion and things like that. Plus, you haven't lived until you've configured your shell with a web interface. Watch this. Fish config comes with a web interface to configure your shell. If you run fish_config, you can add functions, you can look up functions, you can even set your environment variables, you can review your history, and set up abbreviations. Yeah, I bet you didn't know about that. Also, seriously, watch this. How much easier is that than any shell scripting you've ever done? So that's why I use Fish. I do. Generally speaking, I'm going to have a reason for the stuff that I choose. As a longtime Linux person, I spend too much time thinking about my tools. Definitely. Okay, so we've talked about the Packer component, and this thing is building. Oh man, so good. Almost done. And let's talk about the Ansible component next, because that's kind of the next level of the secret sauce here. So the Ansible component, right, we're going to use Ansible to configure a bunch of our roles and anything we want to deploy to our environment. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to use Ansible for a little bit of inventory management. And this is kind of a cool trick. So the way that I intend to use this is I'm going to add an inventory.yaml here to set up our playbooks, meaning that rather than relying on a global inventory, we're going to use a local one to the repo. So we never all the stuff that we need is always in the repo right away. So let's go over to Ansible and watch this. We're going to do, I do have Ansible. Yeah, so we're going to do Ansible inventory list export YAML. This is going to give me a blank YAML flavor Ansible inventory. And I have Ansible already installed. If you need to, you can just do sudo pip3 install Ansible. GIF. Come on, man. You're a long time watcher. What kind of machines does your home lab consist of? The Starbase is an HP ProLiant DL380p Gen 8. And here be the specs. I've got 40 cores on 2 Xeons. I have 64 gigs and about a terabyte of storage. It's not wild, honestly, but it's more than sufficient for my needs. And it cost around, in transparency, it cost exactly $425 from Save My Server. And it's been a champion. I love this machine. Nargath, thank you so much for the follow. Yeah, Matt, it is. It is including CPUs and memory. I did not expand anything. It came from Save My Server with the 64 gigs and the cores that it had. Koblu, the Gen 8s are solid. Thinking to move to the Gen 9s because the vSphere 8 is going to remove support for the Gen 8s. Yeah, I understand that. I don't care as much because I don't want VMware anywhere near my house, basically, especially now that they've been acquired by Broadcom. But, if you can do it, do it. Yeah, so Save My Server is where I picked up, via eBay, to be honest. But, Save My Server was the... Figure out local businesses that are getting rid of their old servers. You can score a pretty good deal on those, sometimes free. So, Leon, that works. However, if the companies are doing their job correctly, you will not get storage media with that. You will have to pick that up independently, right? They better be destroying their storage media. Yeah. I'll also point out there's another site, if you're in the US, that sometimes has amazing stuff, which is GovDeals, which is government surplus. Not always, but sometimes has just wild, and not just tech either. Like, you can find fire trucks for sale on GovDeals. But if we look for server, you can filter, of course, by location. Here you go. Woot. Woot's just Amazon. Look at this. Lot of 5 assorted HP and Dell servers. The starting bid is at $100. The current bid is $345. So that's in Milton, PA. Now you have to pick this up. This is kind of like a bring a truck situation. But yeah, GovDeals is a really cool place to check for equipment. Yeah, it's definitely one of those you better like browsing situations. But yeah, if you're just looking for a cheap server, I think Save My Server is kind of among the best that I found. Right, so if you like, the Dells tend to go a little bit more expensive than the HPs I found. There's your Gen 9 though, by the way. What's the DL380 Gen 9 going for? There you go. So you've got a 417 Gen 9. Do a little shopping here. Chat, what's the most expensive machine you've ever configured on one of these sites? I have my answer, but I'm curious what yours is. So look at this. For 417, this is a Gen 9. You've got, right, 2 Intel Xeons, 8 cores, right? You could kick that up if you wanted. You could go to a terabyte of RAM if you wanted to. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. That kicks it up to $4,800. And they have an extended warranty as well. Save My Server does. So I really was very happy with my experience there. Okay, so Ansible, let me build out that inventory.yaml. And what we'll do here is we're going to add all. We're going to add to children. Here we're going to do is we're going to create a subgroup called infrastructure. And we're going to give it hosts. Notice, by the way, that also VS Code is telling me that it's Ansible inventory. That's too big. There we go. Is Ansible inventory, so it knows what I'm doing. I once had to design an entire data center budget. It was 1.5 million. I mean, okay, that's not a single machine though. So hosts, what we can do with this is we can start configuring things like if we create a Docker host, right? Which doesn't have anything in it. But we could. And we can either, the way that I like to do it is like leave it as the host name here and then add that to my Etsy hosts on my jump box. But you could also do it another way where you could do like give it the IP address and then set up the alias for the host name as well. You could do that. But I like to do it this way, just to keep it nice and clean. And also, honestly, to allow other folks to configure their IP configurations however they like, right? If we're thinking open source. You don't use an internal DNS server. I use an internal DNS server inside of the lab, but I don't want to have to maintain a reverse. Like, I don't want to have to do that for the infrastructure, and I don't have to. If you've maintained a bind server, you know it's a huge pain, and I don't have to because the only machine that needs to resolve anything is the jump box. So I'll rather add stuff to Etsy hosts than maintain a separate bind server. Yeah. And I'll let the domain controller handle that for me in the lab. Let's move out of Ansible for just a moment so I can show you the other big change, which is we moved our router from pfSense to OpenSense. Couple different reasons why. One, proper open sourcing. Two, I'm really hoping that this thing can do something cool with WireGuard that pfSense was unable to do. Now, I have lost some built-in capabilities. I can't do PF blocker NG, so the built-in IPS is something that like you can make work, but it's a little bit more effort than it was in pfSense to just install PF blocker NG. That's okay though. So how do I have the OPNsense configured? I do have 2 DHCP servers configured, right? Interfaces. I have infrastructure, as I said, right? And this is serving as the gateway at 192.168.99.1. And I have isolation doing sort of the same thing. And then if I go to services, you'll see I have DHCP running on infrastructure as well as isolation, which allows me to just pick up IP addresses as necessary. The router can handle that for me. I don't need to do anything else wild. Now, if I wanted to enable OpenDNS to do blocking based on DNS names, I can do that directly from here, right? OpenDNS still has a free tier, I'm pretty sure. So if I wanted to enable OpenDNS, I could do that, but I do not want to do that. Thanks for hanging out, Wookie. And I can also set up a web proxy, which I may do because that's super handy to have access to, right? And to not have to set up a third party. The other thing that I really liked about OPNsense, other than the configuration options and the way that it handles things, is the way that yeah, it is. It does look nicer, Wally. And check out the live view of the firewall logs. That's what's up. Much easier to see what's going on here, and it's an actual live view. I really prefer the way this goes. Code Blue. I ran an OpenSense for a bit before I moved to Juniper Gear. It's really solid. Oh, well, listen to this humble brag about this person who has money for Juniper Gear. All right. So that's the deal. Otherwise, it's a firewall, right? It works like a firewall and a router. The rules look good, though. If we go to infrastructure, I don't know. It just looks nice. It's very clear how these things are working. Okay. Also, just so you're aware of how OpenSense works, if you are looking for plugins, you can find them in, it's a little bit funky, in System, Firmware, and Plugins. So for example, as I said, one of the things I really want to do with this is set it up as a WireGuard server. So if I set up WireGuard, install, I get the output here. Now, I did this setup manually, but I am going to, basically, once it's done, I'm going to output the config.xml that pfSense and OPNsense use to run themselves, and then export it, because one of the things that OpenSense, from an install perspective, does that's super handy is on boot, it starts looking for a mounted file, or it asks you to provide a location of a mounted volume to look for a config XML to import. And if it finds that, it just goes and installs from that, rather than you having to type anything out. So there's like a lot of hackery that Packer had to do for pfSense, and I'm just not doing that anymore, right? And let me show you what it looks like. This is what I had to do with pfSense, and I'll leave it in the repo. Notice that in order to get everything working from the boot command, I had to like do all these key codes, because remember, with Packer, you're literally forcing it through the key combination process if you're not doing an automated install. So any user interaction during an installer wizard, you have to automate this way. Sucks. So I'm not doing this anymore. Instead, I'm going to just load the config directly from a booted drive, or from a mounted volume, the same way we did with the auto unattend. That's how we're going to do that once I have the OpenSense Packer config going. All right, and now that I have WireGuard installed, you can see that I can go over to interfaces, VPN. I may have to reload. Yeah, there it is. WireGuard. So if I enable WireGuard, I can set up my configuration however I want. Yeah. There's no local. But I can do it. All right, that's WireGuards for another time, though. Hey, look, our template built. No muss, no fuss. Let's go over to the Win server and do the same thing. So again, we're just building out the initial template, making sure that everything works. Oh, and the other thing I should have done, notice that I got the IP config out from the template before it built. Notice that I got this output from Packer. This confirms to me a couple of things. One, it confirms that the QEMU agent is working and that it's picking up an IP address correctly, which means that when I bring up VMs with Terraform, I'll be able to SSH in no problem. And by the way, this would not have worked at all if the SSH configuration had failed, right? Because I am, in fact, connecting over SSH for this final provisioning. So we know that SSH on Windows is working, and we know that the QEMU agent is working. So Packer kind of guarantees for us, in the first place, all of the things that we need. All right, so now the server is building. So we've talked about, and I should build up the Ubuntu template as well. Now, the Ubuntu template is a little bit trickier. It works a slightly different way if we do Linux stuff. And, you know, I'm going to focus on Ubuntu because that's kind of where I've lived in my Linux career. If you want to do a Red Hat one, if you want to do a CentOS, or what's the, what is it? Rocky Linux is the attempted successor to CentOS, right? If you want to play with those, it's going to be very similar, except the automation is going to be slightly different. So with Ubuntu, Ubuntu uses this thing called Cloud Init, right? And so if we go to the config here, well, I do need to, okay, I did change these up. Good. This works. This should all work as well. Now this is Alma, that's right, Alma and Rocky Linux. This is a smaller machine. We can modify this. By the way, we can modify that in Terraform as well if we want to up the resources once we have the template. Disk size of 30 gigs, that's fine. Now, the boot command is necessary here for 2004. 2004 works a little bit differently than 2204. The key command, the boot commands that you need to enter to make all of this work are totally different. And so I have the 2204 someplace. I need to set that up. But for now, we're going to use 2004 as our base. It's still in support. So now the one trick with this is that in order to get to the part in the installer where you actually can run this thing, you have to press spacebar during the initial boot. And you can either try to time it out with the boot wait and see if you can get it to right when Proxmox has that component ready to press, or you can do it manually. I find it's easier to just do it manually, hit spacebar, and then wait for the boot command to kick off, and then you're off to the races. For me, that's easier to do because basically once I have this thing built, I never have to rebuild it. There are a couple of pieces I do want to do, though, to make changes, and I wanted to do this live. So as I said, I'm trying to use the QEMU agent in order to phone home the IP address of the machine so that SSH configuration can happen correctly. The way that works in the Ubuntu side of the house, you saw us mount the VirtIO drivers in Windows. The way that it works in Ubuntu, slightly different, because we can install the QEMU agent natively. However, in order to do that, we have to change up the cloud-init YAML file. And so this is the cloud-init file that you need to put in order to automate the install. You might think, you see this late command section here, you might think, oh, okay, we're going to add like a sudo apt install QEMU guest agent or something like that. And that is and that is a good guess, but that is not actually going to work. I don't know why specifically it doesn't work, but I do know that the cloud-init YAML config has a specific key for packages, like so. And basically, this is going to do the installation for you without having to run sudo apt install. So basically, you just add the packages key here, and then QEMU guest agent, and then that's it. And then if we go back over to the config packer.hcl, we're going to change agent to true. Right? How did we have that in here? QEMU agent true. Yep. One space too many. I tend to rebuild my images weekly with CI/CD to install new updates and update the agents. Yeah, you can do that. Although, interestingly, CodeBlue, I would say that's a very... I don't mean this to be judgy in any way, but that, like, agents in the image is a pretty old school way of doing your provisioning, right? The industry is definitely moving toward post-provisioning updates using things like Intune or Config Manager on Windows or Ansible, Chef, Puppet in order to push that stuff post-deployment so that you don't have to build your images so often and you can use these kind of ongoing tools to handle your updates to guarantee state. Bo, thank you for the follow. Looking good here. I have to, and by the way, if this looks easy, please remember that this has been months of angst and crying and pulling my hair out in order to get it to this state. I have had to learn and fail so many times and learn so many things, fail so many times in order to make it look like this. Especially with the Windows build in Packer. Packer has been like my sworn enemy for the longest time because it's so finicky. And, getting all of these different pieces working, there was no one place where it was documented where all of this stuff would work. I had to learn a lot from reading, in part, like config files from Detection Lab and other places and kind of put it all together. And I do have every intention of creating a formal product, whether that looks like a course or edited videos or something, to talk about how to do this right. I have every intention of doing so. We're still waiting for SSH to become available on the Packer build, which is sensible, right? Because the SSH commands get enabled on first boot. So we're waiting for this first boot right now. Now, I believe I kind of only want to do one build at a time just in case something funky goes on. And yeah, the Kali machine we didn't do anything with. I'm curious though, did I give it the QEMU guest agent? I did not. Let's see if we can get it running. To do that, I'm gonna create a new remote desktop connection to it. So this is the Kali machine inside the lab, which admittedly I do treat a little bit more like a machine I want to keep around, because I, put some considerable effort into configuring it the way that I want. There's my fish shell, as you can see. Let's see, sudo apt install yqmu. It might be here, it might not. Oh, it's already there. I just had to enable it in the hypervisor. Wonderful. Then we will reboot it. Jesus, thank you for the follow. Usually that goes the other way around. I promise that you will always see two sets of footprints because I'm not carrying you anywhere. There come the late boot commands to enable PowerShell and the rest. I love how this feels, right? This is as close to like necromancy as we'll get, right? Automating this stuff. Yes, I'm a security researcher, but in my heart, I really think I'm still just a sysadmin. This feels... I love building systems and bringing them up and configuring them and automating it. I think it's my version of model trains. What program is this? So what you're looking at right now, Game Dad, is Proxmox, and Proxmox is an operating system that's known as a hypervisor. It is designed to maintain and orchestrate and handle virtual machines, virtual computers. And so that's what we're looking at here. So we have some machines over here. The node, the Proxmox node, is called Starbase. And we're looking at kind of a remote view of one of those virtual machines, which is a Windows server that is configuring itself. Can it be hosted on a normal PC? It can, but that's all it's going to do, right? So if you have a normal PC kicking around that you're not doing anything with, you can absolutely turn it into a Proxmox node, but your virtualization capabilities will be limited by the CPU and memory and storage of that machine, for sure. So I went crazy and put this on an enterprise server, but you don't have to. Lots of people put this on like Intel NUCs, and it works great. All right, while we're waiting for this to finish up, let's talk. I wanted to show you my favorite configurator ever, because we were talking about prices for configuring machines. This is the most expensive one I've ever found. So perfect timing. So if I want to build a Homelab, what do you recommend? Not this. So System 76, if you don't know, is a US, it's a domestic company that custom builds machines. Their laptops are, I think they're MSI rebrands still, although they're looking to build their own laptops soon. Can there be multiple nodes of Proxmox? Yes. Yes, you can. Set that up in a cluster. You sure can. But their desktops are built in Colorado, and they're gorgeous. And they run Linux natively, right? They're designed to run Linux. Look at them. Oh, God, so good looking. I cannot afford them. But we're going to try anyway. Just to show you what you can do with this configurator, because it's utterly bananas. So let's start with the Thelio Massive. No, we'll go to the Thelio Mega, which apparently is larger. So we're going to design and buy the Thelio Mega. All right. Ooh, Martian Red is an option now. Though Classic Walnut looks so good. No, don't, Zin, wait for it. Pop OS. Oh, we can't. So 24 cores on the Threadripper. Let's actually go then to the largest one then. Because I want to absolutely destroy this thing. All right, Walnut. That's what I'm talking about. Kick it up. Oh, so we were already at 24 cores on the other one, right? So I don't know if that's going to be any better. But we'll try. We'll see. We'll do both as we're waiting for the Windows stuff to build. And then we have to do the Linux one. All right, 24 cores. First CPU memory. We'll give the first CPU 768 gigs of RAM. The second processor, here we go, is 24 cores, 768 gigs of RAM. We're already at 20 grand. The OS drive can be a 4 terabyte NVMe. The second 2.5-inch storage should be a 64 terabyte SSD. We can get more storage, but I want the SSD. So 64 terabyte SSD, you know, because we can. Graphics. Well, obviously we need to go to 192 gigs, 4X RTX A600s. Oh, no. What would you use this thing for? At this point, I think you would use it for protein folding simulations, right? Or like figuring out how to create a static warp field bubble for faster than light travel. That's what I would use it for. Or creating an actual AI. $1,600 watt power supply. Good God. Obviously, we'll add a keyboard to it because System 76 makes their own. Oh no, clicky. Makes their own keyboards. We'll add 2 32-inch displays. But we are budget conscious, so we will not add the master mouse. Actually, that's funny. That is my mouse. You would get every kind of warranty possible. Yes, Canadians. So, for, you know, about the price of an entry-level Range Rover, you could potentially create a new form of sentience. I feel like I've done worse than 49 on this configurator before. The shipping, I thought it was like $300. Oh no. I have to add it to the cart to find out. Financing not available over 10,000. Oh yeah, Neon, I love this mouse. The scroll wheel has a flywheel on it. It's my favorite thing. It feels so good when you're scrolling and it just like keeps spinning. I love that. And the side scroll wheel is actually, I didn't think I would care about it, but it's so good. What GIF doesn't know is that I am basically just an advanced chatbot with a really good 3D model anyway. All right, how we doing? This thing's still running. No, it's not. Something went wrong. Oh, it timed out. It took too long. But that doesn't mean that it failed. It just means that our timeout was too long, which is fine. So for the Windows server, what we'll do to account for that is in our Packer config, see this SSH timeout? We're going to change that up to like 20 minutes. 30 minutes? 30 minutes. We'll give it more time. And that will mean that it will wait that much longer before killing the build. But while we're at it, gonna just so this one has the environment variable. All right, so let's go over to the Ubuntu server and give that a build. Oh, don't need NetPlan anymore. That's right, because that's a thing that we do with Proxmox, actually. So let's go to the config and get rid of the file. Yep. Kill that. That was to set static IPs before, but we're not doing that. All right. Hacker build. And this one takes a little bit of timing, right? Because as I said, I need to hit the spacebar at the right time to get the config working. So this is going to come up. And I got to be watching right there. So I hit spacebar at the right time and then hands off. And then Packer will start typing commands for me in a couple seconds. So that's a little bit more finicky. See? It's typing my boot options. Is it a common practice to use Proxmox with a container technology? Or does it make no sense because we are already working with VMs? I don't know about common, but Proxmox does have the capability of creating containers. You can see the button up here, actually, for creating containers. And it's an LXC container. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit different than working with Docker. I tend to not do this because I don't actually want my containers. Yeah, I don't want my containers root on my hypervisor. Like, I don't want them living on my hypervisor at all, right? I don't want them anywhere near that. I want another layer of separation, right? So like if the container gets escaped, you're in a VM rather than on the root of my hypervisor. You know what I mean? That seems like a really bad idea from a security perspective. And plus, I'm so, like, LXC is fine. So I'm so used to Docker and the stuff you do with it that I would prefer to basically create a Docker role, which is a perfect thing for us to do right now. Let's go over to Ansible and look at our roles here. And one of them is Docker. And let's look at our main tasks here. You can see here that the way that the Docker role works is that we confirm the prereqs, Ansible built-in apt, CA certificates, curl, GNU PG, LSB release, add Docker GPG key, add the Docker sources, install the Docker engine, and then add SecLab to Docker, which again, don't do this outside of a lab. Don't do this in production. It's a very bad idea. So this role basically allows us to just turn any machine into a Docker host. And from there, by the way, we can actually use, Ansible has a Docker plugin to allow us to create Docker containers and networks and stuff like that, and even build Docker images right from a playbook. So I find that to be a much easier way of handling stuff. I'm actually going to change this up to SecLab Docker. We're going to make a Docker host as our first thing. And the other thing I'll mention is I like to maintain an inventory separately. And we got to like blow all this away, right? Because we've knocked off almost all of everything besides the jump box. Yeah, all this goes. And we'll add 192.168.99.1, which is the SecLab router. And that's on the infrastructure network, which I should change actually to call it the infrastructure network. Notice that I'm doing data validation for these with this nice drop down. Found the way Terraform handles Docker to make more sense, but Terraform provider is kind of buggy. I moved to Nomad for a lot of my Dockers. Yeah, so for building container, I mean, honestly, I would say this might be a bit of a hot take, but at the point where you need to orchestrate your containers like that, that might be a time to look at Kubernetes at least Docker Swarm or something like that. And I find that to be, I would not use, personally, I would not use Terraform for Docker. That seems like a very hands-on way of doing it. Whereas with Docker Swarm and maybe Watchtower would be kind of, that would be like a low-rent orchestrator. And then if you wanted to do like a Minikube or something like that to get a bit of Kubernetes going. And I don't love working with Kubernetes. It's very difficult for me. Yep. Same page. That's why Docker Swarm is a nice middle ground, because Docker Swarm gives you the orchestration capabilities without all the additional layers that you get with Kubernetes. So that might be something to look into. I will tell you that my like web stuff, like my website, passphrase generator, things like that, support seems shaky. I don't know about that. It's been supported fine for me. I've never needed support. And it's been working fine for me for years now. Like my website, my passphrase generator, I swear there's one other thing that I have going on in there. I can't remember what it is right now. Is all handled through Docker Swarm. And I just have 2 nodes in DigitalOcean, and it works fantastic. What's nice about that too is that Docker secrets I get for free, right? So secrets management is something that I can do in that whole workflow as well. And so I'm going to make 192.168.99.3. I'm going to turn that into SecLab Docker. Call that Docker host. And oh, no, secrets is for free in Kubernetes. The problem is that you've got the like activation cost of using Kubernetes, right? Not a literal activation cost, but the, I don't know if technical debt is really the word, but like the learning curve and the onboarding cost of bringing Kubernetes in, which is a much lower, it's a much more shallow ramp for Docker. So in order to statically set IPs for Linux machines, at least for Ubuntu Linux machines, we need a netplan file. And those are fun. And we're going to do that with Terraform, actually. So this is where we start combining what we're doing with Ansible and Terraform. So coming over to Terraform, there's a single workstation. I'm going to make a new folder in here and call it Docker host. And this is how Terraform works. So start, we're going to do Terraform init. No. Touch main.tf. I just use Vault, but that in console run Nomad is extra. Yeah, so this is kind of my thing. Like, think about, if you've been following chat, think about all the stuff that Code Blue has mentioned, all the stuff that I've mentioned. Like, think about how many moving parts there are to these things. And these are just home labs we're talking about, right? And remember that, at least for me, like, I'm a security researcher, right? I'm not actually a system administrator nominally. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. So a lot of my objectives for these things is like, what is the minimal viable set of tools that I can use to get this stuff up and running? So folks with limited time, kids, right, are able... Those are old. I need to get rid of those anyway. Dean, I want to clarify. You're talking about a static IP for a server externally? Meaning one that you can access from the internet? I'm going to tell you, you shouldn't do that. And that's because if you get a static IP that you access and like you open ports to, guess what? If you can see it, so can the bad guys. So instead, what you might consider doing is setting up a bit of a proxy situation, or using networking solutions like Tailscale. Yeah, I get it. Use, yeah, I would strongly recommend looking into something like Tailscale to help you create kind of a network across those barriers easily so that you can access your home server externally, but without creating a direct, you know, opening to the internet that way. Yeah, so we're going to do a little bit of copy pasta here. Don't worry so much about the API key you see. That's been recycled. So that's not a thing anymore. But we're going to change this up to make a Docker host. And as I said before, these are now environment variables. And here we're going to name the host. And I've named it Starbase, and I've added that to my Etsy host. So I'm just going to put this in here with var.proxmox-host. And this is the Terraform provider that we're using, is telmate/proxmox. The resource, and again, we're in Terraform now. It's not Packer. Is the VM QEMU. How are we doing here? Still building the Ubuntu server. Looking good. Looking good. This takes a minute because it installs updates and things like that. This is fine. We're going to change this up to seclab docker. It's going to be our name. Target node, same thing, is going to be var.proxmox-host. the clone, this is the part that we have to change. So this is what we're cloning from, right? And instead of... Let me close a bunch of this stuff out. Not that yet. Right. Instead of the SecLab WinWS, we're going to clone it from the SecLab Ubuntu server. Right? That's going to be our clone name. Okay. Oh, thank you for the follow, Dean. Now, we can give it 2 network interfaces. That's fine. No trouble here. A lot of these resources are different than what we've done before. Now, there are a few extra things that I want to do here that are not currently in this Proxmox file. Nope. Did it again. I keep doing that Terraform file. And those are my provisioners, my after-the-fact provisioners. Ooh. The Linux build might fail, and I'm just realizing why. Looking at some of my notes. I forgot to do something fairly important for this. So I'm going to kill this. Yeah, forgot a fairly important thing, which is in order for the Ubuntu server build to work, because I'm not giving it a static IP address and I'm using the QEMU agent, right? It's using username and password. Never mind. That would have worked fine. I'm just being stupid. But another step that you can take is you can add the SSH key to... No, this is for Ansible, and this is something you should do. You want to add the SSH public key of your Ansible server to the SecLab SSH authorized keys, right? So that is a step I do want to take. And I'm just changing the host name here. But after that, what I would do is I'm going to take my public key. Aren't Terraform and Ansible like the same thing? No, definitely not. Terraform brings up the virtual machine. Ansible configures it once it's up. Do I have a custom router setup? In the virtual lab, yes, I do. The router is an OpenSense router that is handling my 2 virtual networks, my infrastructure network and my isolation lab. Yeah, so Wally, it's not a bad question at all. There is some overlap between the functionalities. Like you can run certain provisioning commands as we're doing right now, even with Packer. You can do that, and then Terraform, right? You can do some provisioning if you want, but they're really not designed, like, there are edges to it, right? And you want to kind of pick a tool to do a specific class of tasks. So in my build out, I'm using Packer to build templates. I am using Terraform to build up, to spin up sets of virtual machines. I am using Ansible to assign roles and functionality to those virtual machines once they're up. So I'm going to create it just in my head. Here's a Terraform equals body, Ansible equals mind. Here's the metaphor I'm going for. So from a space travel situation, the Packer template. Hey, Chad. Yeah, we'll get to the Instant 80 Lab in a second. So Packer is the vehicle assembly bay. And if you're not familiar with what the VAB is, or the vehicle assembly building, it's this thing. Where are my Kerbal Space Program players at? This is Packer. It builds the rocket. Okay? Then Terraform is your launcher. The crawler and the launcher that gets everything out to the launch pad and sends it up. Okay? And then Ansible is the orbiting space station that has the additional modules and fuel that the spacecraft needs for the rest of its mission. That's my metaphor, and I'm sticking to it. All right, so we've added this to the authorized keys, and then because that is likely a new file, we're also going to chmod 0600 home seclab authorized keys. And you might be wondering, why am I doing that without sudo? It's because I am the seclab user at this point. I may, in fact, have to make the SSH. No, I shouldn't have to do that. That should be there. Okay. With that done, let's actually commit that. Git add config. Git diff. What did I change in user data? Oh. Git add. Yeah, that's good. We'll do that. Good. And then right, change that up, and then change the timeout. That's another nice thing. Fish is Git aware, and so it'll autocomplete the stuff that I need to add by directory. That's really nice. It'll even do it not by directory, actually. If I just start typing a part of a path, it'll figure it out and complete it for me. Okay. All right, let's do Packer build. Let's build out that Linux machine. And the reason I'm doing that is because this step, the SSH key step, means that it's going to be Ansible ready out of the box. That's what we're doing there. Now, back over to Terraform. Right. So in order to configure an Ubuntu machine with Terraform, there are a couple of extra steps that I need to take. And so I need to have some provisioners. The first one is going to be like so. And I'm going to look this up just because I always get this wrong. Right. So provisioner file. And then the source equals like so. And the destination equals Etsy netplan 00 netplan.yaml, which I think is the name. I can actually find out here. ls Etsy, because netplan is configuring this as well. Just network manager on this because it's not a server. I'm confident it's that though. Yep. Just wanted to check. 00 netplan. Okay, so netplan is, if you're not familiar, it is Ubuntu's way of doing network configurations. And if you're used to like an older way of doing it with Etsy network interfaces, it's a little bit confusing, but it's, you know, it's YAML, so get used to it, basically. And then exec. And we're also going to do another output, which is not this. We're going to get the IP address of it. Oh, actually, this is wrong. This is going to be... Yeah, so this is kind of a weird two-step. We're going to do a sudo netplan apply, which takes that netplan file, which we'll build in a second. But at the same time, Proxmox is like, I know your IP address, right? Nope. Terraform knows the IP address. I need to stop doing that. Terraform knows the VM's IP address as it's getting spun up. And so in order to, if I'm changing the IP address to set a static, I also have to, reapply, at least for this boot, the original IP address. If I don't do that, then Terraform is going to get confused and lose connection to the VM, which is not what I want. Right. So in addition to the sudo netplan apply, at the same time, we do this. And ENS18 should be what it is, right, for the primary NIC. IP adder add dev ENS18. So the default IPv4 address, that is what is going to get reported out. And so we're gonna just do some new lines here. And then we're gonna do IPAS to show the IP addresses to confirm that it worked. And then here we'll do, we're gonna change the name of this here to Docker host. This looks good. I guess I'll change this to Docker host. Default IPv4 address. The auto completion for this should be working way better than it is, by the way. And I think that might be about the way I've opened the folder. Like if I had opened the folder itself, it might be working a little bit better. Now, we're also, we're going to add a new hostname variable. Here's why. Oh, it should be actually. The reason we want to do that is because we're going to also make some changes here. Similar to what we actually did in the Packer. We're going to actually change this up once more. So we did the same thing in Packer to set the hostname as a default, but now that we're in Terraform and we know what we want the hostname to be, we're going to do it again and just use sed to modify those files. Chapin and DevBoot, thank you for the follows. And then finally, sudo hostname, because we need to change it live. var.hostname. That's pretty good. Now we need to make that netplan file, right? Because we've referenced it here in the file provisioner, but we haven't made it. Let's close up some of this. We don't need Ansible up right now. We don't need Packer up right now. Okay, so to do that, we're gonna make a new file, call it 00 netplan.yaml. And actually, since I have one in the trash, I'm gonna use it as a base. Yeah. Like most of that is garbage though, because that's not what we're doing. So first of all, the interfaces are not ENP, they're ENS18. If you do it with the interfaces that I'm using, which is the E1000s, the Intel version, ENS19. So that's part one. DHCP is false. Addresses. is going to be 192.168.99.1/nope.3/24 for the Docker host, which is what we listed before. And then, since we're setting this manually, we're going to have to do some name servers. It's going to be addresses. That's going to be 8888 on the infrastructure server. 8844. I'm not doing anything special, as I said. And search. I'm going to just look up my net plan example. Make sure I'm doing this right. This is good. Name servers. Oh. No. Addresses. It's not a list. Address. Search. Yep. I don't need to search anything in this domain, but I will in the next one. So DHCP4 is true, though, for ENS19. That's fine, because I've got the router handling DHCP there. So that is good, except there's one extra piece that is a little frustrating here, which is that if I set it up this way right now, this is like network engineer nerdery. I'll ask, does anyone know what the problem will be if I set this up right now as is? No gateway. That's one problem. Good eye, Chad. I have to add gateway 4. Anything else? No takers. Actually, gateway 4 is deprecated. We don't do that anymore. It would be routes. To defaults. Okay. Okay. I'll give you a hint. If I set up both of these to work this way, now Network Manager on my jump box is handling this for me. Notice that I have 3 different default routes. Yeah? 3 different default routes. You better have either correctly assigned metrics so that your internet connected one is preferred all the time, or you have to set them up on different tables. If you don't do that, they will be assigned with equivalent metrics, and it's a crapshoot whether or not you're going to get your internet connection if you want it. So if we set this up with a metric of 99, our secondary network interface should come up with a metric of 100, meaning that when we want an internet connection, this is going to be the default route that gets picked, as opposed to this one. Because right now it doesn't know which one to use. And so if they come up with the same metric, who knows what the routing is going to do, right? So make sure that you're being explicit about your metric there. I cannot tell you how much malding resulted in that lesson learned. It was significant. Okay. How's our Linux build going? This always takes forever. Oh no! I forgot what I forgot to do. I forgot to press spacebar. Damn it. That's the argument for learning what the timing is. How did I start learning all of this? It is complex. So before being a security analyst and then researcher, I was the director of technology for schools, but my particular flavor of that was that I was a Linux system administrator, right? And did a lot of stuff with Mac OS as well. So I was in the Linux world, and that was kind of my entree into all of this. After that, it was largely about just learning how DevOps stuff works. I got interested in Docker in a really early in Docker's history, and saw its potential. So I started learning how to use it to solve a lot of my problems, and deploy applications that I wanted to deploy. And then I actually built a career after that, doing a lot of like network administration, software development, where I was deploying applications as Docker containers. And that worked fantastically well. So a lot of that stuff is kind of my basis. And then I have had to learn a bunch about Packer and Terraform and Ansible to support this stuff as well. And mainly just because this is my hobby as well as my job, which can be dangerous, but I do like doing this stuff and I like teaching about it. So that's kind of how I got started, though, was Linux is the base. And I actually really believe that that's a great way to get started. I truly do. Getting started, learning how to set up a single Linux virtual machine, getting comfortable on the Linux command line will just form such a strong foundation for a lot of these other technologies that you may end up working with, because if you have that strong foundation, then that you'll be able to build on that to get to those other parts without the extraneous load of your environment. I am at 99 to 100, right? Yes, I am. Okay. So that's the Docker host. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the single workstation here. I'm going to knock these off because I don't need them anymore. And in fact, take some of this from the Ubuntu Terraform file and bring it over here. Because I want to use Terraform today. But the host name is going to be Windows demo. That won't actually matter for what we're doing. Demo workstation, that's good. Actually, yeah, let's just knock that variable out because we don't need it. Notice that the clone is from seclab WinWS, right? This looks good. I'm actually going to give it a single network interface for this one because I don't need it anywhere else because I'm just going to bring it up. Why change it? Yeah, this all looks good. So if I wanted to provision this thing with Terraform, I could do it. I would have to tell it that my connection type is SSH and then give it SSH credentials to connect to it. I can do that, or I can let Ansible do that for me, which is my preference. So I'm going to try to bring this thing up with Terraform. With Terraform init. Yeah, I still don't have the environment variables. Fine. Let me look up those then so I can set those up. Yeah. So I have to set X. I'm just doing Terraform for this one, so yeah. Set X, this is the fish equivalent of export. PM, API, token, empty taggart at PAM, seclab, I think is the name of the API token. Let's confirm that though. Yep. Empty taggart at PAM, bang, seclab. That's how the tokens are named. And then there's my seclab API key. So API token secret. And yeah, you're going to see my token secret, but it's not anywhere but in this lab, so I don't really care about that. Oh, that's wrong, actually. I got to get rid of that. Okay. Now, if we do Terraform init in here, everything looks good. And if we do Terraform plan, it'll try to see, hey, can I do this thing? No. Your API token ID username should contain a bang. Check your API credentials. Oh, token ID. Terraform plan. Boom. Okay. Now, Terraform build. Apply, not build. Come on. Terraform apply. Do we want to make this thing? YES. And look, Terraform is terraforming. I chain Terraform into Ansible using a modified version of Cloud Possess Terraform null Ansible repo. That sounds really complicated. You want to write up how you do that? So let's see how we're doing here. It's still provisioning. Take a few minutes, but that's okay. Won't take super long. Somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes is what I've been clocking this at. Or, 58 seconds. And there's our ID. Now, I should have gotten the IP address off that output. That was dumb of me. I should have done that. But since it has the QEMU agent, come on. Now that's a question. Can I enable the agent from Terraform? Yes, I can. That was a mistake. It should have been agent equals 1. I don't know why it's not true, but agent equals 1 is how we do that. And so to bring it back down, we do Terraform destroy. Because now we can do that easily. Is having to manually configure NetPlan a Terraform provider limitation? It didn't have to do that with vSphere. No. VDCN, the reason I'm using Terraform is to do a static assignment of an IP address. Even after that survives after reboot. So so the NetPlan thing is to do the static assignment of the IP address. That's what that's for. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to do it at all. But if I'm building out my and this is mainly for inventory management, right? And other things that rely on static IPs. That's why I'm doing this. All right, now that we've added agent equals 1, we can also create a new output, which is the demo IP. And that's going to be the with vSphere, you can assign the static IP declaratively directly in your YAML. Okay. But your template has to have the agent running, right? Uses host customization to statically assign the IP. Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I also think, so if I look at the, there are ways to do it actually if I look at the Proxmox configurer, you can see here that it actually has a way of doing it with Etsy network interfaces. The reason I'm not doing it is because we're not supposed to be using Etsy network interfaces anymore. Right? So instead of doing it that way, I am doing it the correct Ubuntu way with NetPlan. So that's kind of why I'm doing it this. That's not kind of. That's exactly why I'm doing it that way. All right, let's bring that back up. Terraform apply auto approve, so I don't have to type yes. Although I don't know that that's faster. How we doing here, SecLab Ubuntu server? Should still be good. $58 seconds. Almost there. This one's taking slightly longer. That's interesting. It's definitely up, though. Probably because it's waiting for the agent to phone home, right? Which we weren't doing before. Yep, there it is. So that brought it up, and we got the IP address, which is cool. So then if we wanted to do a little Ansible work, we could come over to our Ansible inventory, which we have here, and just make a demo group. Hosts. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky because, what was it? 107. I could give it an alias, but I don't really care. Now, the other thing I need to do for this is vars. And this is because I need to tell Ansible how to handle a Windows machine. So SSH username is going to be seclab. And SSH password going to be seclab123. And then SSH, what is it, shell type? Ansible shell type. Yep. Is SSH. And Ansible. Or no, that's this is going to be CMD. And Ansible connection is SSH. Is it Ansible username? I'm wondering if it is. Rather than SSH username. I think that's right. Let's try it. Waller. Let's come over here. And we'll do Ansible inventory.yaml limit 192.168.99.7. Oh no, it's like windows.shell, right? No root plugin found. My inventory is built wrong. Oh, it's win command, right? Win command. No root plugin key found. I mean, they're going a little wrong, but that's mainly because Ansible is... No provided host list. Damn. Host entry for infrastructure requires a dictionary found class sequence instead. Is that why? Extra colon on line 7. No, because that's indicating that's a key. So the way that it should look is actually like that. See? Notice that they have a colon after the value here, or after the key, I should say. So that's correct. So what are you tripping about? Is it not like this? Yeah, that was it. Sudo I have to install SSH pass. I knew that I was gonna have to do that. Oh, if we SSH first, seclab at 192.168.99.107. Yes. Look, I'm SSH into a Windows machine. This is still very funny to me. All right, now that we've added that thing's fingerprint to our known hosts, we should be solid there. Invalid incorrect password. What? That's because I just have the variable wrong. It's Ansible user. Notice it's not failing. Right, outright. Hey, there we go. Took a second, but it works. So that's our inventory sorted. Cool. This thing is up. And it is reporting, so the agent is working. So that's a huge win. Now, this was just a demo machine. Boy, this server's taking its sweet time. Now, it's showing me a crash here, but install. Python 3 current show trace install return non-zero exit status 3. So I don't know what's going on with this install process. Because there should be an HTTP port serving up the... Yeah, this is not working. That's unfortunate, but we do have the Windows builds working, which is nice. So, God. All right. I really wanted the Linux one working, though, because that's where the Elastic machine was going to go. I kind of need that working. Yeah, so let's figure out what's up there. I have built, like you saw, I had a Linux template built from this thing before. So what is going on? There's user data. Should all look good. SecLab is good. Config packer. HTTP IP and HTTP port, and it's on the right interface. This thing is going to serve out. HTTP directory. QEMU agent equals true, which is correct. I should change this up. For now. I don't need a double variable here. Okay. And so I'm worried that it was something on Ubuntu's side that was failing, because what that looked like was that like updates were failing. To fix that problem, we're going to need to modify this a little bit. Hey, Natty, thank you so much for the follow. So that's the Ubuntu Server 2004, and then we're going to copy it over to the Ubuntu Server 2204. In order to make that work, though, there are some extra changes we need to make. First and foremost, we need to get an Ubuntu 2204 ISO. I'm going to go grab right now. This is going to be a longer stream, but I think it's worth it. And as I said, I have every intention of doing a full build out, like a proper course on this, or some sort of artifact that edits out the mistakes, right, and gives you a clean walkthrough on how to do this stuff. In addition to the new ISO, we're going to need a new boot command. Totally different thing. I have seen build instructions for it, though, somewhere. And I think it's right here. Yeah, there it is. And this one also, we don't have to touch. This is the boot command we want. So in the 2204, the boot wait is just going to be like 5 seconds. I think it's fast for this one. And then we use this boot command, which is very similar in shape, but notice that it's like a little bit different. And then everything else is pretty much the same, but we do need to change up the ISO checksum and obviously the ISO here. So I'm just going to load that up. I'm loading that up from my host machine because it's faster. So ISO images. Oh, it's interesting that we have two of these. Oh, we have a .2 and a .3. Let's remove the .2. I don't need that anymore. And then let's bring up the .2204. We'll send that up. And then while we're waiting for that to upload, I'm gonna just from here, SHA-256 sum, win home, downloads, Ubuntu 2204 live server. Get that checksum so I don't have to worry about that elsewhere. What is my day job? My day job is I am a senior. My title is senior cybersecurity researcher, and I work for a healthcare organization. So I get to play with some pretty interesting equipment on a daily basis. Pretty large. Like, it's not a secret. You can look up who I work for. But yeah, we're talking about an environment of upwards of 80,000 connected assets at any given time. We're talking about, thousands of employees, patients, medical devices. It's a good time. And okay, so this is going to be the Ubuntu 2204. I don't know what Critus is. Critical infrastructure. Are you red or blue team? Yes. So my job as a researcher, really what I do a lot of time is threat hunting, but also adversary emulation. Or threat emulation. So my day job involves a lot of like querying, doing blue team stuff, looking for threats, advanced detection engineering, some stuff like that. But then also, because I have offensive skills, I use that a lot to test our defenses. So kind of a purple team situation where I am always like the velociraptor in the cage poking at things to make sure that what we think our defenses are actually work. And looking for, honestly, misconfigurations. And making sure that when stuff gets spun up, it's getting spun up correctly, and that we're adhering to policy, and that we're not leaving ourselves open in any crazy way. So kind of both offensive and defensive. I'm using offensive skills to harden our defenses. Oh, thanks, Orbital, for the link to PWST. Yeah, I have a course on practical web app security and testing. If you're interested in web app pen testing in particular, which is a huge part of my job, you can check that out as well. Live server AMD 64. That should be the same. 2204, no .2. We haven't gotten to the dot releases yet. All right, I'm gonna try with this one, and I'm also gonna let's give it 10 seconds just to be safe. All right, so we're gonna cd Ubuntu server 2204. Hacker validate. Ooh, what didn't it like on line 22? Oh, extra curly brace. Nice. Okay. Hacker build. So we're going to use 2204 and see if it goes any better. Hey, some rando from CA. Nice to see another Californian here. We are building out a virtual lab full of virtual machines. See, look at it go. It's actually much nicer. That's a long title, Leon. Yeah, I'll also say that sometimes I'm not building a vulnerable machine. That's not what I'm doing. I'm building out a full lab, including infrastructure. So not just a single machine. What you're looking at here is the build out for the capabilities to build out whatever kind of machines you want, with Terraform, Ansible, and Packer. Have you ever dealt with a 0-day breach? How do orcs protect themselves for 0 days? That's a long answer, Dean. But I would say that the best way to protect yourself from 0 days is a good vulnerability management program, combined with actual good detection and threat hunting. So 0 days, right? Obviously, you don't have the vulnerability listed, but having good patching and up-to-date systems makes it harder for those to show up, and for other things to get exploited. Combine that with good active behavioral detections, high-level EDR, and other tools with a SOC team that actually knows how to read alerts. That's the best defense, right? You can have whatever tool you want, but if you're just creating noise in your alerts and you're not actually processing them, then those alerts are meaningless. All right, this is looking good. Notice that here it said starting HTTP server in port 8676. I don't think we saw that for the last Proxmox or the last Packer build, did we? Oh, no, we did. I'm practicing Nmap and Metasploit. See what you want. Yeah, that's a great starting point. And then once you have those in new, Nmap, and once you learn from there, you can move on to more advanced topics. But yes, understanding what's going on your network and using those tools to discover is a great starting point. Found the Helk stack. So Hadoop, Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. It is very interesting. I have never deployed Hadoop because I haven't had need to, but yeah, that's a lot. I'll say though, for the effort that you're going to put into doing that, you may want to consider Sentinel anyway, if you can afford it. Just because the amount of time you're going to spend setting that up is significant. We're installing the kernel. We're doing better here on the 2204 than we did with the 2004, which is interesting. I'm feeling somewhat optimistic here. And then we can use Terraform to bring up the Docker host as a starting point to demo that. And I think maybe we'll leave the Elastic stuff build out for next time, because we've been at this for almost 3 hours. But I do want to show a Linux build out for Terraform here. Oh, good, and perfect timing. I swear we don't plan this, but I do like that GoPro goes live right after me, so we can raid him. Sometimes I dream about a sort of official/unofficial Twitch hacker network where we actually come up with a broadcast schedule. But that's just because I have this instinct to organize things. I don't know if that's really necessary, but it would be cool, right? If we had that, you kind of know where to jump from one to the next if we had like affiliations that way. But I also dream about stuff like a hacker TwitchCon, somewhat like the Only Feet WinterCon. My version of that would probably be a little less hangover inducing. Oh yeah, that's what you want to see. Okay, we've got updating init RAM FS. Let's go. Alan, a couple of other folks in his Discord working on the newest Hack the Box machine. Okay. I gave up my Hack the Box subscription, my VIP subscription, because I wasn't using it. And I realized also, in terms of like what this stream is about, we're kind of moving into a different spot, right? That we're talking about techniques in different ways, and that's part of what we're doing with this lab, is using this lab as our environment rather than relying on try hack me and hack the box things so much. I'm trying to look for a different way to teach those principles rather than flags. Hey, there it is, installing QEMU guest agent. Parrot OS or Kali. I really like both, but I tend to default to Kali because it's easier to teach. because there's more resources out there for it, right? And if you have people who are going for the OSCP, right, they're going to take the PWK and things like that. So just in terms of it being kind of a lingua franca, I use Kali. But I like Parrot OS, and I used Parrot OS actually first because at the time it was saner. I felt it was saner that the user environment wasn't root when Kali was still doing that. That offended me as a Linux user. Leon, stop asking me to do more work for free. I know you're kidding, but like, God. That being said, I actually do have some plans along that line, not for hacking, but for like coming up with a base VM that everybody can use as a learning platform. Okay, we installed security updates. Everyone should make their own hacking distro. It depends. I mean, honestly, you get to a point with some of this stuff where it's like, how much time do you have? And what do you need to learn? It's okay to not have to not want to explore every aspect of this. I mean, the folks that are here is kind of a self-selecting group of people who are enthusiasts, right? But you can do this job and not dive to the depths that we're doing. Right? I own that you can absolutely not explore to this depth. I like doing so, but I want to just like those blanket statements where like everybody should do this. Let's be careful with that, because even if you firmly believe it and even if you think it's a good idea, that's the kind of thinking that kind of gets you into some gatekeeping, where if people haven't done that and they're on a different path, you will start maybe thinking unintentionally less of them. And you just want to be careful of that kind of stuff. It's okay for many people to have different paths to whatever they're doing. All right, we're running the upgrades here. That should be the last thing that happens before the reboot. Yeah, Rando, I understand what you're saying, but at the same point, like, the stuff in Kali can live there without you needing to worry about it, right? Like, you don't have to focus on it. Whereas if you're going to go through the trouble of building a custom distro or using kind of a less supported, less well-known one, then you have this extra load of learning how to do that without the support of the wider community. And so then you've lost focus because you're looking for that material, right? A metric I think about a lot is the time to productivity. Like, how much time does it take for me to spin something up or start to get a tool set up in order for me to be useful with it, right? And that is one reason why, although I used to be a big Arch fan, I'm like not in that phase of my life anymore. And it's okay to move away from that, right? Do it, learn what you want to learn from it, and then move on. Because I need that time to productivity to be higher now because I have other stuff going on. Or I guess time to productivity be lower is what I really mean to say. Okay, while this is finishing its updates, what else can we be doing? We can be putting together the Docker host no, we did the Docker host Terraform. I guess we can start on the SOC server, which is going to be our kind of elk host. And this all looks good, but we're going to change it to SecLab SOC. And we also need the netplan.yaml, because this one's going to live at .2, which we'll put in our inventory. And it's also going to live at 10.1.99.2. Fairly importantly. Yeah. This is going to be SecLab SOC. And all right, see you, Wally. Thanks for hanging out. Cool. And we're actually going to give this one a third network interface, which we don't know, which you'll see why in a second. SecLab SOC. No, I'm in LA. I do not like the Bay Area. You look like those smart guys from up north. I'm from Philadelphia originally. Come on. Hey! How long have I been coding? I've been writing code since 2012, I think. How did I get into computers in general? So when I was growing up, my dad had he worked for a company called Flight Safety International, and basically what they do is they make training materials and flight manuals for commercial aircraft. And he did oh hey, our template built. That's awesome. Wait, did it, or did it time out? Oh, we cannot create home SecLab directory non-existent. Ah, I thought that might be a problem. Okay, so we're gonna just make dir home SecLab SSH. Right. Oh, so my dad was working for Flight Safety International, and he was doing voiceovers for their flight simulators. He would do stuff like, and early days, so like early days of touch screens, right? The kind that had like IR grids that went over flats, not flat screen like what we know flat screen meaning now, but flat screen as in like CRT monitors that weren't curved. They were perfectly flat. And what would happen is you take these IR sensors in a grid, like, come on, like that, and it would like overlay on top of the monitor, and that would be your touchscreen. And so they were making these simulators for like the avionics of aircraft, in particular de Havilland, which was a Canadian aircraft manufacturer. So like he'd do stuff like adjust the elevator trim wheel 3 degrees now. And so like that was kind of what he was doing. And so there are always these weird parts, all these odd components all over the house, SCSI adapters, network cards, early coax, things like that. And it was always in a different state of disarray. It was a complete mess. So if I wanted to get a computer up and running to like play a game, I loved Commander Keen when I was a kid. I still do. I had to get it running myself. So I learned from a very early age how to like set up a motherboard, how to, you know, get something booting from a boot disk, all of that stuff. And so it was very organic. It was just kind of around. So I learned how to do it. And I never had any formal training, but all throughout school, right, I was the kid that could fix the teacher's computer. And that continued into high school. But I was not a very good math student, so I never went into computer science. And in college, I was an English major because I was a writer. I was much better in the humanities than I was in any formal sciences or mathematics. But I came back around to IT as a job after college because I graduated with an English degree. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I ended up as a teacher teaching computer classes for a small school and fell in love with it. I loved sharing technology with kids and opening their eyes to the world through technology. And from there, I just got better and better at it. I kept practicing and learning new things and eventually ended up learning how to program to solve problems that I had in schools. And another thing with coming up in education is that the IT departments are always super underfunded. So for most of my career in education, I was the only person doing anything. Consequently, I ended up doing everything from running network cable, configuring network switches, handling firewalls, system administration, test, you know, tier 1, 2, 3 support, whatever it was IT related. I did it. I do remember Circuit City, and I remember CompUSA. And I'm really annoyed that I moved to Los Angeles before I could visit Fry's. Or after I was able to visit Fry's. Because by the time we got here, they had pretty much all closed. But yeah, so that's how I got into it. It was very organic. And that's kind of the thing I love about this world is that you can do it without paying exorbitant amounts of money for degrees. All right, well, since that template failed, I will build that out on my own. But I think this was a good intro to, again, see how the Ansible, Terraform, and Packer stuff is going to work together. It is 1 o'clock, so I'm going to call it there for today. And then next time, we will actually build out our Elastic server and start getting some machines up with Terraform. So, as I said, we're going to give GoPro a good old rate. And please check out the hack list to see the rest of the InfoSec streamers. And I think that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for hanging out, friends. I hope you learned something. I know I did. So, until next time, please be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking. We'll see ya.